Wrap. This is The Wrap with Jon Faine.
5 minutes past 10. Welcome to the Friday Wrap. It's when you get your chance to tell us what's the most important thing that's happened this week. And boy, what a week it's been. 1300 222 774. 1300 222 774. My rappers this morning with whom you can engage are regular from the Liberal Party, the Shadow Minister for Education and the Member for Kew, Tim Smith. Morning to you.
Morning, John.
And at the moment, I'm afraid Liberty Sanger is at her family funeral today, not able to be here. In her place, Fiona Patten, the leader of what's now called the Reason Party, originally elected to Parliament on the ticket of what was then called the Sex Party. Fiona Patten, good morning to you.
Good morning, John.
You've just held up your new book.
I did.
Hold it up for all the listeners to see.
Yes, here we are, in all its colour and movement.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks,
What's
John.
it called?
Sex, Drugs and the Electoral Roll.
There you go, Tim. There's something for you to aspire to.
No,
You want to be a published author?
well, yeah, possibly, but I don't think I'd call it that, to be honest.
Why not? That was very much
No, I
your
don't think it would suit you, Tim, really.
that was your shtick, wasn't it, when you came in?
Yes, that's right. That's right. So it's and it has been part of my life, and in talking about, I guess the book does talk about. I talk about my life, so it seemed very apposite.
So, what's the most important thing?
Is it appropriate for all audiences?
There are no age warnings on it, although Andrew Denton said best use of a zucchini in a political memoir.
Oh, my God.
Ever. See, you went somewhere that I don't know where you went there, Tim, but, you know.
Just trying to make a subliminal point.
It could have been a ratatouille.
I made a subliminal point. It's been made and we should move on.
What's the most important thing that happened this week? There's been many significant deaths and funerals, sadly. And I don't think I've ever done that before. I just sneezed. The death and now the funeral of John McCain in the United States has led to a patriotic outpouring and also, of course, yet another confrontation between his family and friends and Donald Trump. Sadly, here in Melbourne, we lost Malcolm Mora and the funeral for Aretha Franklin is underway. In the United States, Donald Trump. He's lost his former campaign chairman, his deputy campaign manager, his personal lawyer, his former national security advisor, his foreign policy advisor, all of whom have pleaded guilty or been found guilty of federal crimes. He's lost multiple media spokespeople, multiple members of his Republican Party in Congress, 2 cabinet members have resigned, and the ethical bypass is there for everybody to see. And Robert Mueller's investigation's really only just getting going. It's extraordinary.
And he's got an election.
In November. Extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I don't think... I think we all thought it would be a chaotic beginning to his administration, but the litany you've just read out, John, is interesting.
Well, I mean, he's coming up to his second year and that chaos has only escalated, really. You know, it was chaotic when he started, but it seems to be... The craziness is escalating.
What's the latest opinion poll in America on Mr. Trump's performance?
His standing, as his popularity, I must say I don't, off the top of my head, know.
No,
Do you, Fiona?
I think I heard it was, last I heard it was like 30% or maybe 26%.
Because he still strikes me as being relatively popular amongst the people that voted for him.
With his base, yes. In fact, America is more polarised than it's ever been. Here... did anything happen in Australian politics this week, Fiona? Did you notice anything?
Look, not really. It seemed that same old, you know, people fighting over who can sit in the big chair and, you know, then fighting again over who's going to get the big chair. And then, you know, as always, somebody won and they'll hold it for a little while and no doubt we will see another battle for the big chair.
Well, it's called a general election. There's one due next year, so yes, you are correct.
What's the Tim Smith version of what on earth it is that's going on in the federal Liberal Party?
Well, everyone said this, which is it would be greatly appreciated if our federal colleagues stopped talking about themselves and focused on governing the country. And I think that they're settling down, and obviously the last 2 weeks have been bruising and awful and horrendous, and we all know that, and we've done this to death, and I'm hoping that it settles down, they can move on, focus on the issues that Australians are particularly interested in, which is not the machinations of Canberra. And I'd also point out to my federal colleagues that we have a state election in Victoria in 80-odd days, so if they could quieten down for a while, that would be greatly appreciated.
Doesn't seem to be much sign of it. Even Victorian backbencher Julia Banks has taken the opportunity to put a bit of a broadside across various people's front. So what hope have you got if that's still swirling around?
Well, exactly, and, I wish her all the very best. I'm not aware of what specific issues she's raised in terms of the statement she put out the other day.
You're not aware of?
Not specifically, no.
You've read the statement?
I saw the statement, but...
she says your party has some bullies and people who intimidate and threaten in order to get their way.
And if she's got specific complaints to make, she should make them to the state director or the whip in Canberra.
Have you ever been bullied?
Well, politics is I wouldn't say bullied, because politics is a robust business, as you're well aware, John. So, yes, people have said some awful things about me, but, I think it would be fair to say that in this business you need to have a very thick hide.
Anyone ever bullied you, Fiona?
No,
Have they tried?
They've certainly tried, and I get some very impassioned pleas to vote one way or the other.
But threats?
But no, and I think I think being effectively an independent, I've only got myself to really challenge. But certainly during the assisted dying debate, there was a lot of threats that I heard. Going around where people were being threatened with pre-selection or threatened with election funding and those types of things. So, it's certainly alive, and I've most definitely had reports of it. Obviously I can't say it's happened to me personally.
In the cut and thrust of politics in Parliament, in the way that, the nation is run or the state is run and the way parties operate, yes, people get very robust, that. And unfortunately... I think perhaps sometimes, we take it a bit too far, but that's the business. That is what it's like. What did Bismarck say about...
I think we need to change the business in that case, because I don't actually think that that's how the community wants to see us behave. They see that, that roar of question time, where it's just completely combative, and I don't think that's how the community wants to see their governments operating or their parliament.
Moving on from specifically Julia Banks, Ted Baillieu had a chat to Raph Epstein after she released her statement on resignation. I think he several times in that conversation with Raph Epstein on our Drive program, Tim, said one of the examples of where pre-selections go against women in the party is indeed the pre-selection you won in Kew. Who did you contest that against?
Mary Wooldridge, for which you are well aware, John. And
I just thought I'd get it out from you rather than me.
Look, I saw Ted's comments, and I wish Ted would be quiet, because I don't think him bagging the Liberal Party helps the Liberal Party. And,
is he bagging or trying to reform?
He had his go, and he messed it up, and he really, frankly, if he wants to speak publicly, he should attack the government, not the Liberal Party.
And would you say the same thing for Tony Abbott and Barnaby Joyce and Craig Ellis and
Craig Kelly?
Well, they're MPs.
So they can bag the government.
They're still in Parliament.
Or the opposition.
They're still in Parliament. And I just say it again, that pre-selection was 4 years ago. Can we move on, please? I mean, it's just, why even bring it up?
Well, I think you still... look, I think women need to step up, obviously, everywhere, and I think women should be joining political parties or starting them or seeking pre-selection and joining the Liberal Party.
This hardly encourages more women when they hear from those who have made it through about how horrible it is.
That's exactly right. But I think I was reading an article looking at the UK, which is now having its second Conservative female Prime Minister. And
who can't dance from the video we've seen from our...
That was terrible, wasn't it?
Yeah. Neither can I. But over there, the Liberal Party, the women in the party themselves started to make a concerted effort. And I know Kelly O'Dwyer has sort of tried to get that going here. But, I mean, looking at even your pre-selection candidates for this upcoming state election, you're nowhere near parity. You've got...
Nine out of our 14 target seat candidates are women.
14 out of your 40 candidates
9 out of 14 target
are female.
9 out of 14 target seats are
7
women.
out of your 30 lower house members are women.
Ted Baillieu had this to say when he had a chat to Raph Epstein on our Drive program just the other day after Julia Banks' statement was released.
There is a hang-up amongst the leadership of the party, and it's a problem for the party. It's not as if we're not capable of doing it, but when we see good women treated badly, and we see good candidates treated badly, when we see good members of parliament treated badly, and I've already seen some response to her decision to retire at the next election, which only reinforces the sort of treatment we're talking about.
So that was Ted Baillieu. Let's move on to other things. Dutton au pair gate. What we're seeing here surely is a bit of payback. Peter Dutton stood against Scott Morrison when he was reappointed to the ministry. Immigration was stripped out of his Home Affairs portfolio and given to a Dutton supporter, a Dutton opponent, David Coleman, who voted for first Turnbull and then Scott Morrison in the various polls. It would seem that the Immigration Department is now prepared to provide the documents that under Mr Dutton's regime he simply point-blank refused to provide, and the explanations he refused to provide about the curious decision to give priority assistance to some au pairs coming to Australia when no one quite could see why that was thought to be so important. So is this a bit of payback, Tim?
I don't know, and that's the honest. I don't know Mr Coleman, and I don't know where these emails have come from. You've made sort of certain allegations this morning about where
not allegations.
You asked some questions this morning, which
I'm asking questions which I think are reasonable questions to ask.
And I can't go. I don't know enough about this issue, John, to make any commentary on it. Aside to say that yes,
I want to know: is there any connection between these three au pairs? Were they, for instance, perhaps booked through a single agency which sources au pairs in Europe and brings them to Australia? For instance, what else is there? I mean, otherwise, I don't understand how 3 out of the hundreds of thousands of people, these 3 women got personal attention in their favour from the Minister for Immigration.
I know it's a curious coincidence if that's what it is, but certainly when you look at each of those cases that we've heard, or the 2 that that's been printed about more often, there doesn't seem to be a connection, does there? The McLaughlin said that was, family friend.
But who booked? Did someone book these 3 au pairs through a common agency or whatever? I don't know. And, Mr Dutton's family are in the childcare business, so I don't know. Is there a connection? Well, is there anything here we're not being told? Because so far, Mr Dutton's point blank just said, I don't care, you can ask whatever you like, I'm not telling. Well, I don't think that's not accountable.
Well, I think he was accountable on the issue with the French au pair with the McLaughlins. I saw...
only after the information
an
was
ABC
leaked.
Online piece where he
after
was quite
it was leaked, he went on 2GB and said, I didn't do anything that was against the law.
Except that that woman had been warned by immigration last time she was in Australia.
And the department's advice to the minister was not to extend her invitation.
And it was very clear saying she had done this before. She was a repeat offender.
Well, I saw his commentary on 2GB, and I think he made the point that he felt that this was not a particularly big issue, and that it was common sense to allow this young lady in.
Well, it would have been common sense to let children on Nauru or Manus who needed urgent medical attention, that would have been common sense to let them come to Australia rather than doing favours for whatever reason, for whatever people. Locally, though, we better get to callers in just a second, but locally, well, the huge news this week has been the announcement by the Andrews government of a complete reimagining of what it means to have a suburban and metropolitan railway system. Jacinta Allen, the Transport Minister, explained it thus.
Just as Melbourne over many decades developed the ring road, the suburban rail loop will also be developed. This is about addressing one of the key challenges of Melbourne and Victoria, the need to come into the city to get around the city. Well, that would be over with the suburban rail loop.
Jacinta Allen, and I might say to me the most moving thing this week was the tribute paid to Mercamora by her son Philippe, telling us some magnificent stories on air about a remarkable woman, the likes of which we will not see again. Here is Mercamora's son, Philippe.
She would, as the years went by, the cakes got more elaborate, which she didn't particularly think was great. She was never a snob. As the years went by, she would grab the cake and put a whole face in it and smush it around her face, and then demand that we eat some either on the floor, off the table, or off her face, And if you didn't eat the cake, she said that meant that you didn't love her.
Birthday cakes will never look the same again. 1300 222 774 for your calls. 1300 222 774. I'm reminded Julia Banks in her statement also said that bullies are not just in the Liberal Party, in the Labor Party as well. But let's get straight to you. Shelley in Kew. Morning to you, Shelley. Welcome to the Wrap.
Oh, hi, how are you? I'm taking this on a bit of a different angle, and this is more, I know you've got Tim Smith there, but I only received notification on Monday afternoon by one of my older neighbours that on Glenferrie Road, TPG are proposing to put in 5G antennas. And the notice was not given to any of the residents. I'm literally a street back. It wasn't given to any of the residents, and it was posted on, which I've now seen a photo of, on a pole facing out towards the street. So even as I walk my dog daily, I never even saw it. And 5G, I mean, they've done lots of studies, but I mean, cancer is the biggest call out for that. And
Shelley, is this a new installation or are they adding to a pre-existing one?
It's a new and it's a proposal, and it's being done by TPG, and it's being run by a local company called Logic.
But whereabouts on Glenferrie Road, Shelley?
885 Glenferrie.
So at
right
the corner of
Wellington
Street and Glenferrie Road. Yeah, okay.
Look, Sacred Heart, we've got Trinity, we've got MLC, we've got Ryton, you've got Xavier, and you've got all of the residents. And it's also, the whole entire area is heritage overlay and or heritage listed.
I think it's an excellent area to put up something that will add to the gridlock in the area at school pickup time.
Yeah. Please come down and enjoy right now with all the water. But yeah, the water we can understand because that needs to happen every 100 years, hopefully only. But seriously, and are they allowed? What laws are they contravening by whacking and notifying? I think about 5 of them received only on Glenferrie Road notification in like advertising, collateral, like basically wrapper.
Was it a notice from TPG or the council?
No, from Logic, who are a company who are acting on behalf of TPG.
And I think some of the rules are suspended when it comes to mobile phone infrastructure, aren't they, Tim?
I think they might. Look, I'm not going to wing this because I'm not. This is essentially a federal matter because you're dealing with telecommunications. But I'm more than happy if you wanted to send me an email. tim.smith@parliament.vic.gov.au.
Yeah.
Did you get all that, Shelley?
Yep.
Send me a brief email, and then we'll try and catch up next week and talk about it further. Because this is the first I've heard of it.
All right, but it's happening not just in Kew, of course, Shelley. It's happening all over, not just metropolitan Melbourne, but right around Australia.
I know, but in between schools, in residential areas.
So you don't mind having 5G infrastructure, you just don't want it near you.
Well, I don't know. I don't know do I need it if it's going to cause cancer. They cannot disprove it. In 2011, they had a listing, and they keep doing studies on it, and they say they cannot disprove that it does not cause cancer.
All right, good on you, Shelley. Andrew in Ashwood. Morning to you, Andrew. Welcome to the Wrap.
John, I'm just ringing to find out or to confirm that the lady in there is representing an independent or is an independent.
Well, I'm the Australian Reason Party, but I'm the only one in the Parliament in Australia,
I still
in
don't
the world.
I still don't know why you changed your name.
Effectively, that makes me an independent.
I'd like to applaud you, John. As a 54-year-old, can I say I want to hear more and more and more independence on your radio station, because I am sick and tired of the ALP and the Liberal Party. The nation needs more independence, and I'm critical of your radio station because all you ever have on is Labor or Liberal.
Well, clearly you've just acknowledged that that's not quite accurate, but...
Yes, and I realise you had the lady on the other day.
Steph Ryan is a regular rapper from the National Party, and between now and the state election, and then when inevitably we shortly before or after get a federal election, we will be continuing to pay as much attention as we can to candidates for public office other than the big parties.
Well, John, you're not alone. There's, I think, nearly 30% of Australians now vote for someone other than a member of the 3 major parties.
Well, that would be me. I will not be paying. I will not be voting for the parties, the 2 parties. And John, your charter says that you're to represent everybody, and I do appreciate you getting the independents on.
We will try and do that, but the trouble, Andrew, riddle me this, because independents will never form government. they may play a role in the parliament, but they won't form a government. So we do concentrate on those people who are likely to form a government.
Well, John, I think you've got a charter that you have to follow,
Yeah.
and I don't think that charter represents what you just said.
Yeah.
I mean, you're meant to represent everything equally.
Yeah, we try to, but
well,
given
John,
that Fiona's never going to be the
not good
Premier.
enough.
The
The ABC draws a large sum of tax money. You've got goals you've got to achieve. No one said it was easy, but I can tell you I represent a lot of Australians that are sick to death of the two major parties. Both major parties fired their Prime Minister, their sitting Prime Minister.
Yep.
They are so similar, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
And it breaks my heart to hear people say that independents won't form government or won't get there, because I think if we continue down the track we're going with these two parties, Australia's doomed.
They certainly are in Europe. So, there's not many governments that aren't a multi-party.
Yes, because they have proportional representation in the lower houses of Parliament that form government. We don't have
compulsory voting.
And we don't have that here. And I would just make the point that about 80% of Australians vote at the primary level for the Labor Party or the Liberal Party. And, of course, the ABC needs to be proportionate to the two parties, as you said, John, that are going to form government in this country. And
all right.
If we want an unworkable system, keep voting for everyone in the Senate.
I actually think that
nothing will continue to happen.
Let's get back to text messages and more calls in just a second as well. Any number of people saying, did Shelley ringing from Kew complaining about the phone towers ring from a mobile phone?
I think she did.
Yes. I love all the tourist tractors clogging up the streets at school zone times. They've no regard for anyone else, and these cars have never been off-road anyway, ever. You get no say to phone towers. They're low-impact facilities. You have no right of objection under the law, says Michael in Taylor's Hill. Paulson from Briar Hill says, oh, yeah, withdraw the internet from Kew. Great, excellent. And is the Liberal Party saying politicians have a right to bully each other because that's the way they do business, asks Manny from Mount Eliza. Pip in Richmond. Morning, Pip.
Oh, yes, good morning.
Welcome to the Wrap. You're on air now.
Yes, hello. I just wanted to comment about the injecting room.
Yeah, go right ahead.
And I am a resident that lives 50 metres within the proximity of the new medically supervised injecting room, and I also send my kids to the school next door. And I think it's a good thing.
Why?
Well, my children are no longer seeing people with needles protruding from various parts of their body, which is nice for them, for my three kids who are quite young. And I worry for their sense of safety when they see things like that. And also it's taking a lot of the injecting that was occurring sort of openly, where the kids could see it, and it's putting somewhere where, they are free, people who are addicted are free to inject safely and don't have to worry about overdosing, which just goes to show that anyone who gets ensconced in drugs doesn't do it to get addicted.
Now, Tim and I were going to go and inspect the Richmond Injecting Centre. We set up a time and we, in fact, committed to going to have a look, and then I had to cancel because of illness in my family, so we weren't able to keep that. But we can rebook now that I'm back from holidays,
I'm more than happy to.
And we'll go down and have a look. Martin Foley and also the medical director of the facility, Nico Clark, were here early this morning. Today's World Safe Injecting Overdose Day.
It's World
Overdose Awareness Day.
Overdose Awareness Day.
And they say unequivocally the evidence is in that it's saving lives.
I was down there yesterday.
Well, I'd like to see that evidence, not the hearsay of the minister and his appointed medical professional.
Well, I think we do have an independent body, and I would certainly say Margaret Hamilton is a very fine representative, and I would not...
She's the former head of Turning Point and drug professor, yep.
That's right.
So you were there yesterday, Fiona?
I was there yesterday.
What did you see?
What I saw was nothing, which was very unusual. So I went for a walk through the multi-storey car park, which was, an unsafe injecting centre up until the opening. I found one needle, and I was looking. And I found one needle there.
Typically, 6 months ago, there would have been...
there would have been hundreds and hundreds of needles there. There would have been people injecting on people's cars in that car park. There would have been people slumped over behind cars, and I saw none of that. I mean, I think it's been so successful that it probably needs to open for another 4 hours a day to meet the demand. But as Pip said, we're not seeing that open injecting as much. It's not a silver bullet, but it has saved lives, and it has certainly improved the amenity.
Well, there's some enormous assumptions, and we're being asked to take Fiona's evidence at face value. I'll wait and see what some statistical analysis provides. And equally, we're simply shifting criminal activity from from one part of Richmond to another. These people are breaking the law. They're injecting drugs right next door to a primary school, and I think the messages that sends to young children is disgraceful.
All right, well, we will go and have a look. You've accepted my invitation.
Absolutely.
It was my fault that we couldn't get there. I had to cancel, but we will rebook, and we will see whether or not we learn more as this government experiment, which the Minister again confirmed is just a trial, as it continues. But they're pretty confident that the early signs are that it's saving lives and reducing problems on the streets of Richmond and maybe in a broader part of Victoria and Melbourne as well. Back to your calls and our wrappers after the news headlines. It's just after 10:30. Tim Callanan has the latest for us, and thank you again, Tim.
The Wrap. This is The Wrap with Jon Faine.
28 minutes to 11. Not quite sure how Martin Foley came into our conversation there. Tim Smith and Fiona Payton from the Reason Party. Tim's from the Liberal Party. They're our rappers today. Back to your calls in just a second. 1300 222 774. Just occurred to me, Tim, we talked briefly about how the Premier and Transport Minister announced this grand, extravagant, I think, vision for tens of billions of dollars worth of expenditure to transform Melbourne's railway system from being radial from the middle to the periphery to be orbital. Haven't heard the Liberal Party's response to it.
Well, of course, we used to have an orbital railway line. It actually used to run through my electorate.
The inner circle.
Yes. Yeah. Look, I think Matthew and indeed Michael O'Brien made comments earlier this week, which...
they were pretty off-the-cuff reactions. Have you had time to formulate a more thorough response?
It's going to cost... If this thing is for real, and this is not just a media, a media stunt, shall we say... I mean, Daniel Andrews will be almost 100 years old when this thing is presumably concluded. I mean, it's going to cost hundreds of billions of dollars.
They say 50 to 60.
They say 50, yeah.
I don't think that's accurate. I think you might find...
It's accurate. Look, that's what they say. Their figures may be rubbery, as so often they turn out to be.
I think we love new infrastructure. I think, public transport infrastructure is terrific, but I think these sorts of never promises, you've got to see them for what they are, which is a stunt 3 months out from an election.
Fiona, what was your reaction to it?
I was actually pleasantly surprised to see some long-term planning, but what I was disappointed in was that we hadn't seen any real strategy and looking at the proposal from an economic sense, from a social sense. I mean, we just welcomed...
They say we're now going to do that.
We're now going to do that,
So
yes.
they've announced the vision, that's all.
Yeah, it's almost a little bit arse about, isn't it? But I think also...
It's a good line.
Yes, we should consider that we just welcomed our 5 millionth resident this week, which was, 20 years ahead of schedule or years ahead of schedule?
Yeah, so, Melbourne's growing phenomenally.
Yeah, and at a much greater rate than we're
Can I add one more factor in? The Premier was here on, Wednesday?
Yes.
We took calls for half an hour. He outlined the story, the vision, and I asked him some questions, and then we took calls. I had pages and pages of text messages, and I've been doing this for a very long time. I don't remember the last time the traffic was so one way on anything.
Yeah.
And it was overwhelmingly, 95% of it would have been saying, hooray, hooray, let's just get on.
That doesn't surprise me.
But what we need is bipartisan support for it. So it's not another East-West. It's not another one that gets knocked out.
But this is so on the never. That's what I'm hoping the public realise.
Well, they insist it isn't.
But you have to be planning 50 years ahead.
But it hasn't gone to Infrastructure Victoria. I don't think there's been a terrible amount of due diligence done on this. Anyway,
that's what they're now starting to do. And they say they can start within 4 years. They'll do Cheltenham up to Monash and Box Hill first, at the same time as Airport Rail, which is another leg of it, and then over the next few years,
how can you trust,
few cycles.
This is the same bloke that spent $1.5 billion to tear up a contract for a vitally important road. I mean, can you really trust him on this sort of stuff? The answer is no.
Let's not get stuck on it. Richmond firefighter has called in on the talkback on the open line. Sorry, not the open line. What am I doing on the Friday wrap? Hello, Richmond firefighter. Good morning to you.
Hi, John. How you going?
Good. Go ahead. For obvious reasons, you don't want to use your own name.
Yeah, look, I'm not speaking on behalf of the spokesperson for the fire brigade, but look, I've been working at Richmond for well over 10 years now, and as many people know that we do medical response, so we deal a lot with heroin and OD. Since that injecting room's opened, it has made such a massive impact in that community. The amount of ODs that we're attending, no one would batter an eyelid at doing 3 ODs a shift, 2 ODs a shift. Within the 2 weeks that that opened, I think my particular shift, we turned out to 1 OD. So the amount of needles in the community, the amount of open injecting has dropped right off. And I think anyone who opposes this room really has no concept of how bad the problem was.
All right, we hear you loud and clear. We will continue to ask questions and subject it to scrutiny and evaluation. Thank you for your call. Louise in Kew. Hello, Louise. Welcome to the Wrap.
Oh, hi, John. Thanks for having me on. I want to talk about au pairs. I've got 30 years' experience of running a nanny agency in Kew, and I haven't heard all your conversation, but to answer your first question, where did these 3 au pairs come from? Certainly not from me, but they would have come through an au pair agency. If you Google them, you'll be able to find them.
I did. I found, in fact, there's some very big ones in Brisbane.
Right, okay. Well, I can't comment on that. What I would like to comment on is the first thing being that the media, and you haven't done this, but across the media, people are interchangeably using the words au pair and French nanny. I want to strongly say an au pair is not a nanny.
Oh, what's the difference?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you. A nanny is a proactive childcare professional. An au pair is here on a cultural exchange like a big sister. An au pair is supposed to be only looking after children after school age, so that's over 5, working 15 to 30 hours. We hear so many stories of au pairs working 60 hours, looking after babies, etc. Now, the third thing I wanted to say, and I'm going to use the language they're using in America at the moment, I'll probably get a blast for this. Au pair in Australia, as in America, are cheap childcare. They are scab labour. That language comes from the US, where there is a class action happening. 90,000 au pairs are claiming back wages, telling tales of exploitation, and the nannies in America are saying they're taking our jobs. So I want to very clearly differentiate. An au pair can work brilliantly if you've got a 13-year-old that's studying French and wants to practice.
Okay, so explain one more thing to me, Louise.
Sure.
If you're bringing someone in for a well-to-do family, whether as a nanny or an au pair, how do you approach immigration?
We don't bring nannies in from overseas, but I used to send Australian au pairs to America, and I stopped that scheme after about 7 months because great Australian au pairs nannies were being exploited. In immigration, and I can only go with what I've read in the paper, but the family to do with the French au pair are denying that she was working. Sorry, free accommodation and looking after the children is working. She was exploited if she was getting no money. She's supposed to be earning pocket money. There are au pair visas, and they're essentially backpacker visas.
Yeah. There certainly are. There's particular rules. Look, there's so much more, and if the Minister was prepared, or the ex-Minister of Immigration, now Minister for Home Affairs, if Peter Dutton was not so secretive about it, I think he's contributed, my own view is he's contributed to his own problems by refusing to be accountable.
But when can you ever accept that someone says, I'm coming in to work as an au pair on a non-working tourist visa? You know, to me, that's pretty black and white. I was actually at a migrant training centre in my electorate just the other day where they were training tens of women and a couple of blokes on early childcare.
Yep.
So
why not?
Plenty homegrown.
There's work. Devon Ballarat text message. There's a scoop. Fireman rings in, supports Labor. First time ever. Chris in Mount Martha texts in, Tim, suggesting you get nothing done because of independence in the Senate, then immediately trying to dismantle any possible future rail infrastructure is the definition of hypocrisy.
No, I wasn't.
Could you ask Tim if he's ever changed his opinion on any matter, asks Tony in Heidelberg. Can he explain when when he gets to see things differently. Nothing will stop him worrying about the Richmond safe injecting room. He refuses to believe the evidence. Definition of an au pair, domestic assistant from a foreign country. Daniel Andrews had a mandate at the polls to stop the East-West Tunnel. Remind your Liberal person that. Stop bringing up the money waste on the East-West Tunnel, which was caused directly by Michael O'Brien's letter of comfort and Dennis Napthine's refusal to be reasonable. They should have been the ones to be held accountable. Several people saying that, and I've merged their texts together.
And I think this goes back to that bipartisanship.
If only. By the time the railway link is built, wouldn't we all be using flying cars? So don't waste the money. And people saying, well, Daniel Andrews has dealt with the level crossing removals, so maybe they should be trusted. The traffic is remarkably one-sided on this particular piece of infrastructure, and I reckon the government will be very pleased with their week's work on that front. What it does mean for the Liberals, though, Tim, while we're stuck on this issue, it does mean that somewhere in Tim Pallas's coffers in the Treasury, they reckon there's enough money to fund something of this magnitude. So surely the Liberal Party should come up with equivalent expenditure projects. If you think there are better ways to deal with Melbourne's transport needs, well, there's that much money to spend over that time frame. Come up with something else.
Well, there's a huge amount of trust that you're putting in Tim Pallas there that I wouldn't necessarily agree with. And you're also assuming they have costed this thing, and I don't think they have. But we will have a number of very big announcements over the next 3 months in the lead up to the next election on these matters, and just stay tuned. Alrighty,
Doug in Glenroy, thanks for holding on. Morning, Doug.
Good morning. I'd like to talk about the banks. It's come to my notice that after 100 years of operating, Westpac rely on international lines of credit, and when that funding increases, they increase their mortgage. That was an insight to me.
Yes, and their concern is, Westpac said on 7:30 the other night, their concern is also about return to shareholders.
Yeah, that's right. After 100 years, it seems they have enough retained profits to do anything they want to do with their business.
No,
I don't think
they distribute dividends. That's what they do with profits that they've got, Doug.
Yeah, they probably pay too much, don't they?
Well, that's up to you, and that's up to you to decide whether you want your super tied up or your direct shareholding tied up with that bank.
Well, the bank make decisions. They decide to pay shareholders and continue to rely on international lines of credit rather than their core business.
All righty, good to hear from you, and thank you indeed for joining in. John in Brunswick on the wrap. Morning, John.
Good morning, John. Yourself and the two panel people with you,
good morning.
Does anyone in the studio, including yourself, know the answer to my question? It relates to all the mischief coming from Canberra for the last number of years, ever since Mr. Rudd lost office to Julie Gillard. Then Julie Gillard put Mr. Rudd back in, and then we went through similar with the current operators. Does anyone know in the studio? Oh yes, what year was that? What year was the first time Kevin Rudd lost office?
2010.
2010.
9, I was going to say.
Yes, so it's eight years of revolving doors.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, ever since John Howard, we haven't had stability.
Okay. Now that's my point. Now my question relates to anyone in the room where you are, including yourself. Who sets the agenda for the curriculums here in Victoria?
For the curriculum? Well, Tim Smith's the Shadow Education Minister.
VCAR, which is the Andrews Labor government of the Victorian
Curriculum
Assessment Authority.
My question relates to when I was in high school decades ago, we were taught about Julius Caesar and all the backstabbing.
Yeah, do you think...
Is Julius Caesar the play taught?
Coming home to roost now.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, look, I think Shakespeare wrote that a long, long time ago.
So nothing's changed, does it?
No, nothing does change, does it?
That's why Shakespeare is such an important part of our English curriculum, which I'm very passionate about.
So maybe that's some homework for the panel. If either John is going to be back next Friday, and maybe there's a new panel. But could you advise me? Is that still taught in schools to this day?
I guarantee you, I will put that out there. You've posed it. You've put it out there.
I'm happy to go and have a look at the curriculum.
You won't need
or the reading list.
0437 774 774. Could someone who is or has been either a student or a teacher of English in secondary schools let us know, is Julius Caesar still on the syllabus? Is it still available for... obviously schools can teach it if they want to, but is it in any way compulsory? Could you let us know, please? 1300 222 774 or 0437 774 774. The suggestion is that there are plenty of television documentaries that would provide ample equivalent inspiration for people, including Utopia, which we played a little bit of to the Premier the other day when he was announcing his railway plan.
How apt.
Well, there's that lovely moment. What's Kitty Flanagan's character's name? I can't remember. She's the spin doctor in it all, who says, we don't build things, we just announce them.
Well, it's possibly a documentary.
Yeah, well, who knows? Is Julius Caesar still taught? ABC Comedy is the most cringeworthy stuff around. Let's not forget Brendan Nelson was done over by Turnbull before Rudd was done over by Gillard, says Glenn in Hyatt. So there you go. There's all sorts of stuff coming through. Dale in Launceston's called in for the wrap. Dale, how's beautiful Launceston?
Oh, well, a bit drizzly and overcast, but we've got our 12 degrees.
Yeah, well, it's a bit warmer in Melbourne today. Anyway, welcome to the wrap.
Well, John, I hope this is okay. This morning I was listening to your Tassie counterpart, Sarah Gilman, who does a wonderful job, and there was a comment, Nick McKim was on, obviously criticising that, and rightly so.
He's one of the Greens Tasmanian senators, yes.
Yes, and afterwards there was a caller that came in, and I didn't pick up, just a punter, I guess, and he was saying that either, I think it was Dean Natali, but I'm not sure, and I'm not sure of the accuracy, Dean Natali or Band were paying a care worker $150 for 48-hour week. So I just thought, you just wonder if it just doesn't spread across the board, really.
There were allegations raised in the last federal election about Richard Di Natale and the arrangements he had for childcare in his family, and he was furious. I don't remember the details, and I don't know if the figures you just quoted are accurate or not, but he was he regarded it as a bit of dirty pool played by...
He called her an au pair, from memory.
Do you remember clearly enough?
Yes, I'd be pretty certain that he said she was an au pair, so she was coming in under this notion of a sort of a working holiday.
I don't remember the specific details, but yes, I do remember. Genevieve in Box Hill can tell us about Julius Caesar. Hello, Genevieve.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome.
I'm 6 years out of high school, so I'm at uni still.
Yes.
And Julius Caesar was taught in Year 11 at my school, and it's still being taught.
And what did you learn from it, Genevieve?
Oh, a lot. That the lessons there are ever present in every society, no matter where you are, no matter what time.
Yeah,
yes.
And that nothing's changed over thousands of years, no matter what part of the world you're looking at.
Nothing's changed, and I'm surprised that people haven't learnt from it. So, yeah, anyway.
And what do you make of the current politics? Do you think it's a bit Julius Caesar-esque?
Oh, I think it's very Julius Caesar-esque. I think it's ever since Rudd and Gillard did it, nothing's changed and people still haven't learned. But yeah, I'd like for them to just get on with governing, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the refrain. Thank you, Genevieve, indeed. Thank you to all of our callers. But if you want to stay on, I'll get to you in a moment on the open line. But particularly thank you to both of you, my rappers for today. Tim Smith from the Liberal Party, Fiona Patton from the Reason Party, filling in for Liberty Sanger. And yes, Kitty Flanagan's character was called Rhonda in Utopia.
That's right.
And yes, as far as we're concerned, though, she's a real person.
It's a documentary.
So well done.
It's a documentary.
Thank you both.
Thank you, John.
See you
Thanks,
again
John.
soon. Tim Smith from the Liberal Party, Fiona Patton from the Reason Party. Your calls on the open line in just a moment.
This is The Wrap with Jon Faine.